authentic conversations about ourselves and our community, exploring topics that uplift and inspire us. From personal growth to social change. So grab your teacup and get ready to join the conversation.
I can see you haven't slept well.
Yeah, well, got a lot on my mind. Expecting someone?
Freya's never late.
You're really fond of that thing, aren't you?
Well, we all need someone to keep us company.
You really don't remember anything about me.
I'm proud of you.
Nothing at all.
Sorry. But it's given me a new perspective on life. Everyone is a blank canvas to me now. I have no grudges to hold.
But no good memories either.
I prefer to focus on the positives. Anyway, if what I did upset you so much,
the kids there humanizes him. It's what they have to do. Again, he didn't testify, so bringing up the fact that he has a family is important. Having the family there to show support is important. Again, they're there today. I don't remember how many of the younger kids especially were there throughout the course of the testimony. There is graphic testimony, but even if you're Sean Combs, you haven't been able to shield these kids from this trial over the last 6+ weeks, not to mention that led up to the trial before then. So I think it's good that they're there. I think it's important that they're there. Whether or not it's appropriate for them to hear some of the testimony, I don't know the intricacies of the family dynamic that well, but I think it's more important that they're there and hearing things that may make them uncomfortable than having them not there at all.
Yeah, I think he has some twin daughters, and I remember early on in the testimony when it was really starting to get graphic at the beginning, it was reported that they got up and they walked out of the courtroom. I mean, you do whatever your opinion is on Sean Combs, to hear those things that your dad's accused of, it's not easy to listen to. Another update from the courtroom, Mark Agnifilo says, Cassie gets a burner phone. Finally, that's what you expect in a racketeering case. She's the one who got the burner phone the morning of December 22nd, 2021. The whole thing with Cuddy, talking about Kid Cuddy and all that, she had 2 hotel rooms, and room for a burner phone. Aaliyah, he's really going in on Cassie Ventura right now. How do you separate, okay, the text messages may show that at the time she was consensual, but I'm sure for these jurors, she was pregnant on the stand giving emotional testimony. I remember Elizabeth Milner, she's been in the courtroom every day, was talking about just how emotional those moments were. Yeah, it was 6-7 weeks ago. How do you as the defense, and how do you think the defense is doing going at Cassie Ventura pretty early on here in the closing arguments?
I think they have to. I think that Cassie is, a very huge piece of this entire case. And I think that pointing out that she has a burner phone, while they think it might be beneficial to them, I also think it cuts both ways. It means that I have a phone that I've gotten on the side because I'm so scared of my partner, in this case, Mr. Combs, going through the phone that I have, checking my phone, having my passwords, right? If she truly did not believe that she was in a space where she was safe, trying to get a burner phone to have some sort of normalcy, that could kind of cut to the prosecution's argument of coercion, force, and duress, right? I also think that from an emotional standpoint, I remember there was testimony early on that defense counsel wanted Cassie Ventura to already be seated when she was giving her testimony, so the jurors couldn't actually see that she was 8 months pregnant, right? I think that was, of course, it was denied because it was unreasonable. But I think that if you look at where Cassie is now, and married, she has 3 children, and she's moved on, and obviously having to relive this entire huge chunk of her life on the stand, it was emotional, and I'm sure the jurors were leaned in, right? And again, as we said before, this is not a case that no one was familiar with, right? This is a case that people knew that Diddy and Cassie were together. Did they know the details of their relationship? No. But to see it in real time, of course it's emotional. So the defense has to do a good job of poking holes. Do I think that was the greatest argument to make? Because again, it kind of supports the prosecution's theory. No.
Because I also think if you're Diddy's defense, you better be pretty sure that the jury doesn't have this team Cassie 100%, almost as if she's a friend. And then in the second, I mean, you really run the risk with what we're hearing he's saying this now of kind of turning off the jury to the argument that they're trying to make. But to your point, it's kind of what he has to do. Another question, also from the UK, pretty cool to have people joining us from across the Atlantic. William Estella K80 says, in the unlikely situation, in her opinion, that Diddy walks free and something were to happen to a juror or witness, you think of the allegations of witness intimidation that Diddy's faced, would he be somewhat protected with double jeopardy? They do say they're from the UK, not sure on US law. Where does the law stand on, let's just say he walks free, and then more evidence comes forward of some of the charges he's facing?
Well, if it's more evidence of the charges he's facing, then double jeopardy applies. You can't be tried twice for the same set of facts and circumstances for the same crime. So if he was acquitted, even if all of a sudden they realized there was more evidence down the road, they wouldn't be able to retry him for these exact same things. Could they retry him if something new came up? Absolutely. Anything's fair game at that point. I think defense counsel may try to say that there's double jeopardy, but if it's the exact same crimes, no. If it's something brand new, sure.
And another update coming in, and you kind of see the direction that the defense is going right now as they're making their case for Sean Combs. Let's talk racketeering. The judge is going to give a legal charge later today, assuming the first one is the 2004 kidnapping of Capricorn Clark. Let's talk about her. She said, "I wanted my life back. Capricorn Clark's parents passed away when she was young. I don't mean any disrespect. She told you. I'm happy she did. Others didn't tell you about their parents. She moves to the Bronx and meets Sean Combs. She goes super platonic. What? I think she means she didn't want it to be platonic. She's out there. You could see it. She says, you know, I had the biggest crush on you. I think we misused our dope chemistry." So now going at Capricorn Clark, another witness who said that Sean Combs, she accused him of kidnapping. Knowing what we heard from the government yesterday, very fact-based, went down the line, laying out their case, Aaliyah. To this point, how is, I guess, overall, what's your read on how the defense is doing and whether or not these are effective arguments?
Effective is a questionable word. I think that arguing that she couldn't have been kidnapped because she had a crush on Sean Combs, like, I'm sorry, where does that fall in the statute? It doesn't, right? Like, I did not feel, if I was taken against my will, I did not feel like I was free to leave. That is kidnapping, like, period, right? So if I had a crush on you, maybe they're trying to argue that, oh, she's biased and the prosecution got to her, but I don't think that, I think the prosecution's doing the best that they can arguing that. I don't think that it's as effective as it could be, simply because me having some sort of relationship or being interested in dating this individual does not necessarily equate to that the kidnapping or what I testified to didn't happen. I think from a credibility standpoint, if you get, you know, we do have a male-dominated jury. I think they were trying to make that argument like, oh no, these are just women who wanted him or who went after him. So I guess that leans to their theory and to their side, but I don't necessarily know how effective that it is. I think at minimum, they're just trying to create bias, because I can believe that this person might have had a crush on this individual or might have been interested in dating him. And I can also believe that this person kidnapped me. So I think the two things can be true.
One thing I'm noticing as just comparing yesterday to today is there has not been one Christina Coram reference in Sean Combs' defense, where yesterday she came up multiple times. Diddy's right-hand person. She was really a ghost in this trial because she's mentioned so many times. You see a picture of her, but she didn't testify. William, what role does she play in the final moments of this trial? And what do you make of Diddy not mentioning someone who was there for so many stories that the prosecution told?
Sure. I think she was a very important non-witness for the prosecution. I mean, she was, for all intents and purposes, an unindicted co-conspirator. So for the racketeering, and conspiracy issue, you know, we need to show that it wasn't just one person. The government needs to prove that there was more than one person involved in these crimes, and they have her. And they can point to things that she did. They can point to things that she helped orchestrate. And she was, for all intents and purposes, an unindicted co-conspirator. I don't think that the defense has anything to gain by mentioning her once. Because again, remember, the prosecution gets to give a rebuttal argument after the defense closing argument. So if the defense attorney starts talking about, you know, where's KK? Why didn't she testify? Or anything along those lines, that opens the door for the prosecution to just hammer home that this wasn't just Sean Combs doing these things. And they need to show that it wasn't just him. He was sort of on top of the pyramid, if you will, and there are other people there. She's one right under him. So I'm not surprised that the defense is staying away from that. I would. But again, she's important. She's been important throughout the course of this trial.
When this goes to the jury, which we believe is going to be on Monday, according to the judge this morning, Aaliyah, how likely is it that the jurors will sit around and be like, why wasn't she called?
I think that that's a fair question, and I think they would definitely be thinking about that. I think that it also speaks to the fact that neither of the sides called KK, right? She was also not offered by Sean Combs as well. So I think that that also leads to that whole argument as to maybe she would have been beneficial to the prosecution, maybe she would have been beneficial to the defense. But I would be asking the same question. Well, why didn't she testify? The prosecution might come back and say, even though you did not see her physically in the courtroom, you have heard from her, you have heard these text messages, you have all the witnesses mention her and how she has been involved. So maybe they're just going to try to rely on the fact that even though she wasn't in the courtroom, she was in the courtroom. But I would definitely be asking myself that question as well if I'm a juror. Like, well, why didn't we see her?
Well, we have a couple more minutes. We're at the bottom of the hour, and then Sierra Gillespie is going to pick things up for us here on the Law and Crime live stream as we follow Diddy's closing arguments. So let's get right to it, William. I mean, at this point, we've heard part of what the closing is from the defense. And I know Aaliyah's kind of smiling. She knows the question that's coming, and probably the one that so many people just want. How do you see this finishing?
I think that Mr. Combs is going to be found guilty of at least 3, if not all 5 of the charges that are remaining. Probably all 5.
Which one is his best chance of being found not guilty of?
The sex trafficking of Jane.
Interesting. Why so?
I think that is murkier. I think that it certainly isn't as clear cut as Cassie Ventura. I think it isn't as clear cut as the racketeering. I think it isn't as clear cut as the transporting of the sex workers. I mean, the transporting of the sex workers is practically a given. I think that there's almost nothing the defense attorneys are going to be able to do to rewind that. It's going to happen, and he's going to be found guilty of this, and I really do feel that way. And I think Cassie Ventura, such a key witness, very important, brutal testimony, and I don't think that the defense scored enough points on cross-examination. I don't know that they could score enough points on cross-examination. Same thing with the racketeering. There's a lot here. When Aaliyah was talking before about is water wet, Sean Combs knows he's committing a crime when you hand a guy, $10,000 in a brown paper bag to get a video. That's problematic. That's bribery. There's no way around it. That witness testified under a grant of immunity because he himself had criminal liability as a result of the things he did at the behest of Combs. The Kid Cudi incident, again, he's not charged with attempted arson, meaning Combs isn't charged with attempted arson, but it certainly does come in there as a predicate offense for the racketeering. So all those things hit. If there's anything the defense attorney can home in on, it's the other sex trafficking charge. And again, sometimes, not always, sometimes the jury does want to reach a kind of comprehensive or some sort of verdict where they give something to both sides. So maybe what they basically do in the jury room is say, look, we have all this evidence. He is absolutely guilty beyond a reasonable doubt of these charges. This one's a little squishier. And since the government hasn't proved it beyond a reasonable doubt, we're going to find him not guilty of that. I'm not sure that it's that much. I'm not sure that they're there. But if there's one charge that the defense team could have some leeway with, it would be that one. But as far as the other 4 goes, I think he's going to be found guilty.
I'm happy you brought up the brown bag of cash because I think, and this is just my opinion, that Eddie Garcia, who is the security guard, that story he told about the Intercontinental Hotel having the video, Christina Coram allegedly hounding him to turn this video over, and then he goes to meet Sean Combs at an LA high-rise. The big security guards there are intimidating him. Sean Combs calls him Eddie, my angel, and counts out $100,000 with a money counter like you see in a mob movie. If I was a juror, that's something to me that would jump in my head, especially when you're trying to make the link to, was the guy that was a regular on Ellen actually something more close to John Gotti or Al Capone? Aaliyah, how do you see this finishing?
I think the same as my colleague has said earlier. I think the Jane Doe sex trafficking is a little bit more difficult. I think it has left a poor taste in the jurors' mouths that she is still receiving a benefit of it. I think her rent is $10,000 a month that is still being paid. I don't think that anyone, a normal person, a reasonable person, would think that you're being coerced if you have $10,000 rent being paid, because most people don't have $10,000 a month in rent, right? Most people would say this individual could have gotten away from him, got herself a little studio apartment for, what is the going rate in Manhattan? $3,500 now, and then going on. But I think the other crimes, all of the other crimes, there's going to be a conviction of. I think what's very, very important for everyone who is watching to remember, Cassie Ventura did not want to testify in this trial. She had to be subpoenaed by the prosecution to testify. So that whole argument of it's a money grab and this is what she's going after, she wanted to go away quietly. And she was forced to testify under a subpoena, because as we know, if you enter a subpoena, you go to jail. So I think it's really, really important for our viewers to remember this is not something she herself wanted to do.
And especially with how pregnant she was at the time. I mean, who in their final weeks of a pregnancy wants to be going through, allegedly the worst moments of your life in a federal trial? Thank you both so much for joining me this morning. This was a lot of fun, very important testimony going on. Aaliyah Roberts, trial attorney, William Corman, criminal defense attorney. Both of you are awesome. Sierra Gillespie is going to be taking my spot after this quick break, continuing on with both of them. We'll see you.
All right, we still got a lot of naysayers. We got a lot of yay-sayers for the acquittal or the conviction of Diddy. Y'all drop it down in the chat where y'all are. We're going to keep it on with the Diddy trial. Okay.
867. She says, with the prosecution charges, how much time does Diddy face now? Will, what are you thinking?
Well, I mean, these charges are very, very, very serious. I want to say that racketeering carries, 20 years plus, and after if he's convicted, the judge has the ability to stack these charges one on another, stack the sentences one on another, and at that stage of the game, we're into the stratosphere in terms of possibly years away. Again, this isn't a drunk driving case. This is about as serious as it gets. I mean, sex trafficking, that carries with it a significant sentence. Racketeering, a significant sentence. And if the judge decides to stack these sentences one on top of the other, unfortunately for Mr. Combs, that could be literally decades behind bars.
And I mean, if we think about it too, he's 55 years old. He spent almost the past year at MDC Brooklyn, which isn't the Ritz or, the Intercontinental Hotel for that matter. It's not one of these amazing hotels. I think, any sort of sentence like that where we have decades could be the rest of his life. I mean, it's definitely wearing. Let's go to another viewer question now. I have two. This is Bex5009. She says, says, so the defense won't bring anyone, and that's the end. Did people want to support him, or what happened there? What are you thinking about that one, Aaliyah? I mean, they didn't call anyone.
No, they did not. They had a list of proposed people to call, and I think we talked about this briefly yesterday. I think someone from I don't know if it's Revolt or Bad Boy or Human Resources of one of his multi-named companies was supposed to appear, right? I think that they thought about that because on Cross, that individual is now going to open the door to even more of the support for RICO, especially if we start talking about accounting and what was paid out of a business account for the freak-offs or for transporting these sex workers, right? Or for buying baby oil and the other substance that was used. I think that there were two more witnesses that were purported to be called, but they were not called. I think it's very, very interesting that there was not one person that was produced. I'm sure as a viewer, like myself, you're thinking, well, why didn't they do that? It's strategy, right? Some people were thinking that Sean Combs was going to testify. I'm glad he didn't. I think that would have been a bad move on the defense counsel's part. But, there was no one to actually speak to any portion of this on the defense side. And I think the jury is going to think about that. Whether or not, they use it to credit the weight of their decision or not is a different story. But they're definitely going to be thinking about the fact that no one came and spoke on behalf of the defense.
I tend to agree with you, Aaliyah. First of all, I think that it's a great choice by P. Diddy not to take the stand, although I would have loved to see it and hear what he had to say. But as far as calling no one zero witnesses, that is puzzling to me, and I agree with you that the jury is going to be thinking about that. I mean, they heard 6 or 7 from the government, then they heard the closing arguments. They're expecting to hear something from the defense and just get nothing. I mean, I think it's going to be something in their brains at the very least. And we've been talking a lot about our viewers. Thank you so much for interacting with us. We have a poll that was up. It was, can a relationship with domestic violence be a great modern love story? Because, of course, in his closings, Mark Agnifilo compares Cassie and Diddy to a great modern love story. But then we have these domestic violence situations. I mean, we've all seen that intercontinental video at this point. So here's what our viewers said. Yes, 11% said could be a great modern love story. 80% said no, and 9% said unsure. So I'm going to ask you about that one, Will. What are you thinking? I mean, domestic violence plays a huge role in this case. He's not charged with it. So is it difficult for jurors to kind of parse out when they're in the deliberation room?
So I think that from the beginning of this case, the defense counsel has basically talked about how this is a domestic violence case, and that's all this is. And I think that's what they have to do, because we can't do anything about that video. It's right there. It's almost, I know it isn't technically exhibit number one, but in the jury's mind and in my mind, it is exhibit number one. I am very wary of the idea that a relationship that's full of domestic violence is a modern love story. I take issue with that. If I were the prosecution in my rebuttal, I would be all over that, because I think that's somewhat offensive to suggest. And with all due respect to the 11% of the folks in the poll who think that that is a modern love story, that's troubling. And it's certainly not something that I would harp on if I were a defense counsel at all. That's a tricky way to view a relationship, and probably not a proper one, and not one that would score many points.
I think you brought up a great point. It is really troubling because not only do we have all of the people who are involved in this, I mean, we're talking Cassie or Jane, who are the survivors in this. We have jurors who live their lives. They have their relationships. We don't know what went on in their past relationships. So let's say they're, had an incident at some point in their past that something went, off. They're thinking about that and hearing, was that a modern love story? I don't know. So I tend to agree with you about that too, Will. And by the way, we do have some updates straight from court, so I'm going to read them to you now. This is Mark Agnifilo still going on with the closing arguments for the defense. He's talking about Kid Cudi now. He says Cudi didn't say that Capricorn said Combs had a gun because there was no gun. Working backward, Cudi didn't tell the police about a gun. It was written up as a trespass. That's all. There's no gun. Capricorn's story falls apart. He goes on to say there was the car chase. Or was there? And again, this goes to what Aaliyah was talking about before. I do think he's being dramatic here. He goes on to say, Cudi pulled up next to the Escalade. The witness said there was no car chase. The judge is going to say you can disregard any witness if you find something not credible. If you see fit, it's all you need. He goes on to say, seems like everything is possible with Capricorn Clark. I asked her. She said, I came up here with Puff. I want to run away. I'm afraid of mountain lions. Mountain lions? I'm not saying they are scary, but if you were kidnapped by a gun, no. He goes on to say then, she, meaning Capricorn Clark, doesn't want to say, I went there by my own volition. I'm not saying Sean Combs didn't go there. He wanted to fight him, fine. Mother effer. Combs is not a coward. He's ready to fight. At the risk of being sexist, they are men. They fight. And here's the last update for now that I have for you. We're going to have a good old-fashioned 8 in the morning Hollywood Hills John Wayne fight. The Porsche, not his style. There's no evidence. Who else would do it? No evidence. Burning a car is cowardice. Be a man and fight him. Okay, I think he's going in guns a-blazing, Aaliyah. What are you thinking about this? Because, of course, this was a huge topic of conversation. Initially some people were thinking, okay, maybe the arson allegations and the kidnapping allegations were dropped. But, I mean, if we read, the paperwork, it was attempted kidnapping, attempted arson. So, of course, the government yesterday touched on those things, arson and kidnapping. And now this is Agnifilo talking about both those things. What are your thoughts with that update, Aaliyah?
Okay, let's begin at the beginning. Diddy couldn't have bombed Kid Cudi because we're men and we don't bomb, we fight. We know that you fight. I think the prosecution is going to have a field day with that. Oh, you're a man and you fight? Like you drug Cassie down the Intercontinental hallway? Like you kicked her? Like you hit her over the head with a frying pan? Like that type of fighting that you do? Diddy, I think that was, at the risk of sounding sexist, there are also women on the panel that might be like, well, where were we going with this, right? I think, again, we've said time and time again, they have to put something forth. I don't know how beneficial that was, right? I think the defense is saying, yeah, he was there, but he wasn't there to blow up the car. He was there to fight. Well, that's still supporting the argument of why are you fighting Kid Cudi? You're fighting Kid Cudi because Kid Cudi was in a relationship with Cassie and you wanted Cassie and you controlled Cassie, so the answer was no. And that then again supports the argument of persuasion with the use of force and duress that we're talking about regarding the sex trafficking.
I tend to agree with almost everything you're saying there, Leah, because there's a lot to unpack. And I don't know, I'm going to ask you this one, Will. Do you think he's digging himself a hole here? Because we've talked about this modern day love story, which to your point could be offensive to people. Then we have this thing where he says, at the risk of being sexist, men fight. What are your thoughts on what he just said in closings?
I mean, I can't say it any better than Aaliyah did, but I'm gonna try to buttress what she said to some extent. As a defense attorney, as any attorney giving a closing argument, defense or otherwise, the last thing you want to do is accidentally alienate a juror, because these jurors are the ones who are deciding the guilt or innocence of your client, or whether or not the prosecution, the guilt or innocence of the defendant. And so to risk alienating a juror who may have had a domestic violence incident in their past, or a friend with a domestic violence incident in their past, or who may all of a sudden take offense. I mean, if you're going to get up in front of a jury and say, I hope no one takes offense to this, that's a giant red flag that, hey, somebody might. And that's problematic. I'm a little surprised by this. Now, what would be interesting is we know that yesterday during the prosecution's closing argument, it was very methodical. They had a lot to get through. There was a lot of reading. Whether or not they are going to be able to pivot and be as emotional in response to defense counsel's argument as defense counsel has been to theirs, because that would be a home run for the prosecution. If they can pivot and go from reading the cold hard fact to now actually feeling some emotion on behalf of the alleged victims in this case and convey that to the jury, it's a guilty across the board if they're able to pull that off.
And I do wonder if that's what it's going to be, kind of a slow burn. Yesterday, the government went through, and it basically was a list of, okay, this year this happened, and here's what you heard from this witness, and laid everything out. And I'm sure it was a lot to digest. But then, if they have the defense with Mark Agnifilo potentially slamming his fist, as we keep saying, and saying things like the modern love story and potentially sexist things, then if you come in, guns ablazing with the government for their rebuttal, I think you're right. I mean, that's the last thing that is going to be in jurors' minds. So I'll be interested to see what happens there. And by the way, we do continue to see your guys' questions, the live stream viewers. And so I have another one. This is from JAM 1035. He says, Sierra, giving the impending civil lawsuits accusing Combs of sexual assault against children or minor youth, could the feds or state bring class action lawsuits rather? How would they best proceed? And Aaliyah, I'm going to send this one over to you. I was interested in the fact that there were civil lawsuits that involved allegations with minors, and yet when the indictment came down, we didn't see anything about the minors. It wasn't anything that was brought up in the courthouse behind me. So what are your thoughts about all of that for the future? Could it be some sort of class action lawsuit like our viewer was saying?
From a civil standpoint, there is an opportunity you have to have a class certified in order to bring a class action lawsuit. So they would have to essentially investigate all of these individual plaintiffs. When I say they, I mean the plaintiff attorney bringing the class action lawsuit would have to essentially vet all of these 30 or however many individuals there are to then build what's called a class, go before the court and say, hey, we have a certified class in this specific situation against Sean Combs, and then they would have to present evidence in order to be certified as a class action lawsuit from a civil standpoint. As far as the fact that there were minors that were potentially mentioned that were not, sometimes that is a strategy standpoint to not bring minors in. It's also possible these children who have parents who would not allow them to testify, right? They are minors, which means they have a guardian or a parent that can say, hey, no, we're not putting our child through this. And in that case, you can't subpoena a child, right? You can subpoena a grown-up, but you can't subpoena a kid. So in that case, maybe there was a situation where they weren't able to do enough vetting to build the case for the minor specifically.
We do have another viewer question too. This is from Kelly B's 6578, and she says, what's the maximum, a number, if a judge decided to make them consecutive? You said decades. Is that 30 years or 60 years? And thank you for asking. This is a really good question. And I think it's pretty straightforward. Could be life. Could be the rest of his life, all of it, if he's found guilty, especially if the rack is hearing. What do you think, Will? And this is down the line, obviously, if there's any sort of conviction in this. When it came time for sentencing, I mean, are we thinking consecutive, concurrent? And again, this is all speculation because there hasn't been any sort of verdict. We don't know if it's mixed or a full sweep or what it is. But what does it tend to generally lean toward?
I mean, we're really trying to use our ESP powers and read tea leaves here, and that's very difficult to do. If I were going to guess, and it is literally just a guess, I would imagine that there would be a sentence of around 20 years, and I'm not quite pulling that out of thin air, but I'm pretty close. And as we talked about before, you know, Combs is 55, and respectfully, that's not that old, but nevertheless. For him to spend any time incarcerated, for anyone to spend any time incarcerated is dramatic and can be terrible. But I would imagine that we're probably talking about a 20-year sentence, give or take.
To your point, that is all speculation right now. I mean, there has not been any sort of deliberations even. In fact, we're still in the closing arguments right now from the defense. And we do have some more updates from court. This is Mark Agnifilo once again. He's the one who's presenting the closings for the defense. He's still talking about the situation with Kid Cudi, Capricorn Clark, an alleged kidnapping, and then, of course, the alleged arson. Here's what he says. What's in the car? Molotov cocktail. Why not show you the glove? I'm suggesting something? Yes. The investigation stunk. It's terrible. 2 fingerprints. What happened? Well, I don't know. You're going to determine his fate on arson, on this. And again, he's talking about all of the situations that the investigation after Kid Cudi, you know, reported this and spoke with police. And then there's that glove, the driving glove that was there. Agnifilo went on to say the DNA was consistent with a female contributor. That witness was not helpful. If it had come back consistent with Combs, they would have bragged about it. Investigator Jimenez never followed up. He tried to find Cassie. He said Jimenez said Capricorn's brother obstructed him. They fought. I'm not saying Capricorn did it or Cassie did it. We're not here to solve the world's problems. Cassie's father didn't call him back. The witness was mad. Draw your own conclusions. Wow. Okay, so he says he's not here to solve the world's problems, and he's bringing up Cassie and Capricorn. This is fiery to me, Aaliyah. What are you thinking?
Remember how back in the day we had, if the glove don't fit, you must acquit? Remember that? Yeah, we remember that, right? So in this instance, right, the same argument we're trying to make now, I'm not going to say that I think OJ did it. OJ did go off and then write a book and say, if I did it, here's how I did it, right? Take that what you may. But the arguments that he's trying to make here is, hey, look, the DNA wasn't a match, so it couldn't have happened. That also speaks to the RICO charge. Why would Sean Combs go and do it? Now, I'm not saying Sean Combs did it. I'm saying that someone in Sean Combs' camp did it. That's the argument that the prosecution is going to make. And then I saw how they were trying to say that, oh, the investigation specifically, they didn't do a good job of following up, et cetera, et cetera. And that's fair, which is why Kid Cudi was brought into the court to testify. Right. I think that with CSI and with all of our crime shows, we always want to know the DNA. We always want to know the DNA. But we also have to remember that a witness, a person who has experienced or been a victim of a crime, their testimony is the evidence. Right. There might not be fingerprints or blood or glass or anything, but I, as the victim, standing up in court and saying what happened to me, that is evidence. And that is why we have this issue with credibility when we have actual victims testifying or witness testimony.
It's so funny that all roads seem to go back to a glove. I love the comparison you made there with OJ, and now of course we have the driving glove in this case. I think it's interesting to bring up, and I liked your point, Aaliyah, when you were talking about the investigation, because many of us watch these shows, you know, Criminal Minds. I to binge that with my roommate Nicole in college. We love it, and yet it's not the same in real life. Will, I'm going to toss it to you for the next question here. And my question is, we're waiting for that rebuttal. We're hearing a lot from Agnifilo. Fiery, I didn't mean to say that as a pun as we're talking about arson. It just kind of came out, but hey, there it is. So we're hearing a lot from Agnifilo. What are we thinking are the points that the prosecution is going to touch on during rebuttal?
I think what the prosecution is going to hone in on is everything you just heard from defense counsel doesn't matter, because what they're trying to do is they are trying to distract you. You know, it's sort of the magician where they're waving their hands around so you're not watching exactly what's going on. And that's what it is, because at the end of the day, regardless of whether or not the glove fits or the glove doesn't fit, it almost doesn't matter, because as Aaliyah said a minute ago, what really matters is who is doing this and who are they doing it the direction, whose direction. So it doesn't matter if Sean Combs' DNA isn't on the glove. It doesn't matter if it was a woman. It doesn't matter if it was a man. It doesn't matter if it was whoever or whatever. But the fact of the matter is that if we can show that Combs was directing it, that's all we need to prove. We don't need to show that Combs was literally the one who was calling prostitutes and saying, will you please fly to LA? Will you please fly to Atlanta? Will you please fly to Ibiza? We just need to show that someone was doing it at Combs' behalf. We don't need to show that Combs was day after day beating up Cassie Ventura, beating up Jane, beating up Mia, in order for you to know or for you to believe that there was such an atmosphere of coercion and fear and threats and intimidation that these women would do anything he said. That's what they're going to say. They're going to say, don't be distracted by the show that defense counsel is putting on for you, because what you really need to do is drill down in the details. And the details are, this guy, Sean Combs, was orchestrating this entire thing. The proof is from the witnesses themselves, who said, as we talked about earlier, they went to an LA luxury high-rise, and Sean Combs is there counting money to give to Garcia. The evidence is there. This awful video that we've seen over and over again, where Sean Combs is brutally beating up Cassie Ventura. That's what this case is. Whether or not the glove fits is irrelevant. The fact that there was a glove, that's what matters here.
There was the glove. Does the glove fit? I don't know. Still a lot of questions, but I like what you said there, Will. I'm going to have one more update from court here. Again, happening right behind me. Mark Agnifilo is giving closings, and here's what he's saying. Here's an email, obviously an exhibit. Why is she calling him Sean Puffy Combs? For some later proof? Doesn't mention any car. Forget it. Let's turn to the London hotel. If you want to go to someone's house, it's not a kidnapping. It's unfair. Cassie is public too. And of course, this is in reference to after Diddy allegedly stomped Cassie's face. Then the alleged kidnapping is when he, again, I keep having to say allegedly, forced her to stay in this hotel and she didn't want to. Agnifilo says, remember, Cassie also didn't want the tape out. She had a movie coming out. Let's go back to what was said about the hotel staff maybe leaking the footage, and we're talking about Intercontinental Hotel now. They were worried about publicity, not a misdemeanor. Guess what happened? It was sold. And again, that infamous Intercontinental video, and I'm sure he's probably going to talk about Eddie Garcia and the alleged bribery there, the payoff, the money machine that was counting cash. I mean, a lot of head-in closings. We're about to wrap up for this part of our live coverage, though, and I have to say a huge thank you to both of our guests who've been on with us for 2 hours. Will Corman.
All right, they're gonna wrap that part of the deliberations of the prosecutors and defense. Let's skip on down the rest of the day and close out with whatever they got going on. Okay. How do you guys feel? We're winding down to find out. They say no earlier than Monday. We should know. Potentially, maybe, if Diddy will be acquitted or convicted. I say acquit. I don't see they're gonna get Diddy on these charges. I just don't. However, I do see them attempting to try with this Mann Act shit. I read that. There's a link in the chat to understand more of what that looks like. Okay. So they're back up at 3 hours, 26 minutes. So let's get it.
Happy Friday. I'm Anjanette Levy, and you are watching Law and Crime live on YouTube, and we are covering the closing arguments, the defense closing argument in the trial of Sean Diddy Combs. He, of course, is on trial for a number of charges in the Southern District of New York in Manhattan. He is charged with racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking, and transportation to engage in prostitution. Sean Combs says he is not guilty of all of these charges, but the government says he committed all of these acts. And now it will soon be up to the jury to evaluate all of the evidence and look at all of it and determine whether he is not guilty or guilty of the charges. We are going to be taking your questions as we always do during the lunch hour. So please drop them in the chat there in YouTube, and our great panel will get to all of them. But before we get to that, I want to check in with Sierra Gillespie. She is outside of the federal courthouse in Lower Manhattan. Elizabeth Milner is inside the courthouse, and she'll be joining us in just a little bit to tell us what's been going on inside the courtroom. So Sierra, tell me, a good afternoon, first of all, what has been going on outside of court this morning? Have we seen any hoopla?
Hi, Anjanette. I'm always keeping an eye out for hoopla, and I haven't seen much. However, I will tell you, yesterday we talked, and it was more somber here. You know, it was closings from the government, and we were expecting something. And I think the crowd is kind of mirroring what's going on inside of the courtroom, right? So the government's closings, according to reports, are kind of methodical and slow and, you know, not a lot of emotion. And that was the crowd yesterday. But today, we're hearing Marco Niffolo is in there, and he's loud, and he's making jokes, and he's saying things that are kind of off the wall. And I think the crowd has responded to that in a way. I mean, already when I got here at 8 o'clock this morning, there were lines out the door waiting for people to get inside to hopefully get a spot inside the courtroom or maybe even the overflow room. And I have seen some of those people we spoke about yesterday, you know, the people who are wearing the hats or the t-shirts that say Free Puffy. And kind of surprisingly, the most crowds I've seen have been for a Britney Spears movement. People are still talking about her conservatorship. At first, I thought I was to P. Diddy, one could assume, but as I took a closer look, it was really about Britney Spears. So that's kind of what we got going on today.
Yeah, that's kind of odd because Britney is free as far as we know. You know,
Britney
she's no
is
longer.
Free. Yeah,
she is free. She's been free for a while now, so maybe they just are carrying the torch for that for some reason. I do want to talk to you a little bit about who we are seeing now showing up at the courthouse. We know throughout the trial, of course, there's the big overflow room that we've always heard about. There are journalists showing up every day to cover this trial, social media influencers, YouTubers, people like that. But now you said you're seeing more people showing up. Are there more people showing up? And right now on our screen, obviously, we're seeing Sean Combs's daughters showing up to court. But I want to talk to you specifically right now about the other people showing up to court. You know, you see Free Britney people, Free Puffy people. Are you seeing more people gathering at the courthouse in anticipation of a verdict, who want to be a part of this and see what's going on inside court?
Yeah, I think we definitely have seen that. I mean, where I'm at right now, we have been camped out since the start of the trial, and many other news organizations have been too. Beside me, there's live hits going on right over here and down the line. So all up and down here, there are, you know, reputable reporters. We're talking like CNN or ABC, NBC. I was actually speaking with a man from BBC earlier. So this has gone international. But not only have we seen people like that, we've also seen, to your point, Anjanette, live streamers. So many people have their phones with them and they're, you know, like this all the time, talking and trying to interview. As I've been on the live streams earlier this morning with Chris Stewart, I saw people who were live streaming me live streaming. So it's kind of a lot of that. And I do think that's something we'll see more of as we continue on throughout all of this, because right now we're in closings, but as deliberations go and everyone kind of gets antsy, what's the answer going to be? What's the verdict? I think we're just going to see more and more.
Now let's talk a little bit about Sean Combs's family, because he's had family support showing up, family members showing up to support him throughout this trial. It's almost like they've been showing up in shifts. The daughters were showing up this morning and yesterday. They had shown up in the very beginning of the trial, and then we didn't see them for a period of time. We know that they had some graduations and things like that. Plus, I mean, this is just kind of icky for girls to listen to, this testimony, for any child to listen to about their father. There's been some other stuff going on, though, with one of the sons, Justin Combs. So tell me a little bit about that. Is Justin Combs there today, as we have some news about a lawsuit that's been filed?
Yes, Justin Combs is here today, and I want to talk about that lawsuit. But first, I want to talk about the fact that almost all of Diddy's children are here today. He has 7 children in all, the youngest being Love, just a little girl. She's the only one who isn't here today. All the rest are. And this is also something that Mark Agnifilo highlighted today in closing arguments, talking about Diddy's family. And I do think that the jurors, the people of the court, are picking up on this. As you said, they've been pretty much there all since the beginning, except for some of his daughters who were kind of in and out, but they are there today. Now, Justin Combs, he's the main one that we want to talk about today because there have been some legal issues with him. So I'll kind of break that down for you. This was a filing that happened on Monday of this week, and I do want to state right from the top, it was criminal, not civil, and these are all allegations. However, there is a woman who filed under the name Jane Doe who alleges some misconduct at the hands of both Justin Combs and P. Diddy back in 2017. So I'll kind of give you an overview of what the filing says. That back in 2017, the spring of that year, this woman, Jane Doe, who lived in New Orleans, Louisiana, started Snapchatting with Justin Combs. And they're going back and forth. At one point, she admits she sends him risque photos, according to the lawsuit. That's what she calls them, or her attorney does in the lawsuit. But additionally, she talks about her big dream. She wants to work in the entertainment industry. She's got stars in her eyes. And Justin Combs says, okay, you know, my dad actually kind of works in the entertainment industry. Why don't you come out here, out to LA? And so according to the lawsuit, it was under false pretenses that she headed over to LA. And after that, that's when she said things kind of, you know, went by the wayside. She alleges that she was held in a hotel room for an entire weekend, given drugs and alcohol, and then she says she was raped by 3 men who were wearing masquerade masks. And I think this is the important part here, is she says 2 of them she's not sure who they were, but one of them she recognized and she identified, name dropped in the lawsuit, was P. Diddy. She also mentions that Justin Combs referred to him as Pops, you know, something that you would call your dad. So that's kind of why she pointed him out there. And I do want to highlight that in this civil lawsuit, she straight called it being held prisoner. I mean, that's pretty strong language. Now, I also do want to share the other side of things too. Justin Combs' team has spoken out, and I do have their statement right here. Here's what they said. No matter how many lawsuits are filed, it won't change the fact that Mr. Combs has never sexually assaulted or sex trafficked anyone, man or woman, adult or minor. We live in a world where anyone can file a lawsuit for any reason. Fortunately, a fair and impartial judicial process exists to find the truth, and Mr. Combs is confident he will prevail in court. So we kind of heard from both sides there, but amidst this civil lawsuit, Justin Combs is right now in this courthouse behind me.
As y'all hear it coming in live, another lawsuit filed against Combs, girl from Louisiana, saying that they done aped her and drugged her and, you know, took her against her will, all this extra crazy carrying on. We will be covering what's to come of the Combs family after the trial, acquitted or convicted, next week. So stay tuned to Tanisha Talks Teas. We'll be covering some things, dropping some tea. Okay. Remember to like and subscribe when you come in the room. Also, drop your teacups in the chat along with what you think about what's going on with Diddy's wrapping up live closing arguments, ex-trafficking trial, USA versus Sean Combs.
Very interesting, and an interesting development given that we're at the end of this trial. And I think, you know, you make a very good point to bring up that Sean Combs and his children, especially Sean Combs, has always said in these statements that he's never sex trafficked or sexually assaulted anybody. So we do want to make note of that. Sierra, thank you so much. You're going to hang out with us in the back there, but I want to bring our panel in now. Remember, everybody, drop in your questions for Sierra and our legal panel, and we will get to as many of them as we can. Put them in the chat. But for now, let's get to the panel. Awesome panel we've got here today. Bradford Cohen, up next to me in the box. He is an entertainment attorney and a criminal defense attorney. Mauricio Padilla is also a criminal defense attorney. And Alexis Rosenberg is a federal litigator. Thanks to all of you for being with me today. So I want to get your thoughts on closing arguments thus far. It sounds like there's been a lot of drama going on so far today. Bradford, the government has asked for a curative instruction. Maureen Comey said that there was some issues in Mark Agnifilo's closing argument. Judge Submaranian said that the issues were grossly improper, particularly the one questioning charging decisions. And the judge said he would give a curative instruction to the jury addressing that issue. So that's pretty wild to me. What do you think of that? You hear these things come up. People ask for curative instructions all the time. So your thoughts?
I don't think that much of it, to be honest with you. This happens. This happens all the time. Closing argument gets very heated, gets very passionate. I mean, I know myself, Maurice, anybody that I am friendly with that is in the criminal defense world or even the civil world that loves their job, loves their client, wants to do a good job, is a warrior in court. That happens. It happens on our side, happens on the government side. The government sometimes oversteps their bounds, and we ask for a curative instruction. And those curative instructions are kind of like a joke, to be quite honest with you. When it happens and the government does it, they overstep their bounds, and I ask them, hey, I want a curative instruction. I move for a mistrial and then a curative instruction. Judge always says, oh, it's not going to be a mistrial. I'll give you a curative instruction. Hey, you know what? The prosecutor said that, his client's super guilty and all these other things, just pretend you didn't hear it. And that's not part of what you're going to debate on, what you're going to decide on, and the elements that you're going to be presented with. Just ignore that like it didn't happen. Juries don't ignore that. So when it comes to closing, it's like the gloves are off. And I think the defense knows what is at stake. In any criminal defense case, they know what's at stake. And they do anything and everything to make sure the jury understands that, number one, is if they feel this case is dirty, if they feel like there is a reason why the case was brought, or there's a reason behind how, really they were forcing this down the throats of everyone that's around, the press and all these people that they were doing all these things. The defense wants them to know it, and they'll say it, and maybe it's improper. And then all of a sudden the judge yells at you and you get a curative instruction. Your job is to defend your client the best of your abilities, and tempers run, hot, and passion runs hot. And that's just the way closings happen. And I don't think it's like, oh my God, they're going to get a curative instruction. Like that's going to be a big thing. I think it's expected.
Very interesting, and things do get heated. I want to give you guys a little bit of an update on what has been going on in court. Here's an update from court. The judge said to the jury, in open court, before the break, it was suggested that you should consider why this was charged, that it's not proper. I will be instructing you on the law, Mr. Agnifilo. And then Agnifilo said, now we'll talk about Mia. She loved working for Mr. Combs. This was not forced labor. That's one of the allegations or one of the charges under the racketeering conspiracy, one of the predicate acts. Combs, as Agnifilo then responded, remember the birthday video we showed you? She was bubbly, popping. That's the real her. You are free to conclude she put on an act here. If Mr. Combs felt it was improper, he would not threaten to tell Cassie it was consensual. When Mia says it was not consensual, she is not telling the truth. There was no unwanted sexual conduct. Mia's feelings were not platonic. So they're saying that Mia had feelings for Sean Combs. Mr. Steele questioned her about these wonderful pictures and slogans. Effusive. It's not just a job. Agnifilo then said, this is a demonstrative. You can't take it into the jury room. Consider the scrapbook that she made. And she was questioned about that by Brian Steele as well. It was a scrapbook for his birthday, about all of his accomplishments. He said, I'm going to read it to you. Happy 45th birthday, Puff. This is from 1991 to 1999. I hope it stirs up nostalgic feelings, how great you've become. Agnifilo says, she loved you. You can't fake that. That's real. Don't leave sight of that. It's not just business. He gives people a home. Look at this picture. Think of a word that comes to mind. Joy. There's KK, D-Rock, Fahim, and shows a photo of the staff in the scrapbook. Agnifilo then says he created a remarkably special place. He moved people in their hearts and souls, talking about Combs. When Mia is told she's being fired, she's going to leave the special place. My life is over, she said. KK said, OMG in a text, and OMG, what, WTF? And Mia responded, WTF, Mia, that's not funny, because Mia had said, I'm going to kill myself in this text when she found out she was losing her job. Agnifilo then said, racketeering co-conspirator KK writes, Mia, answer your phone or I'm going to call your parents. The last thing she wanted to do was leave. And that's forced labor? Let's turn to drug distribution. The U.S. said personal use is a distraction. Agnifilo then said, Brendan Paul said these were personal use drugs. He said he forgot to take the cocaine out of my bag. He said, I got the best lawyer in the world and my charges were dismissed. That's what he said. Sean Combs was not selling drugs. Agnifilo then said, Cassie said he was a drug addict. How is he supposed to get them? Grow his own Xanax? Did he have drugs? Yes, they found it in his house. Was he using his enterprise to distribute drugs? No. You're going to have to think through this. So I'm thinking, Mauricio, what do you think about all of that? These are things, they're trying to cast doubt on what the government has presented, their witnesses and the evidence.
And I mean, at the end of the day, this is not your average RICO. And if they want to make the argument that, distribution is just, I gave somebody a hit of ecstasy at the orgy. I mean, okay, if legally speaking or not, that's gonna rise to the level that they need to convict them. But at the end of the day, people are not used to seeing that. You're used to seeing distribution, someone selling drugs, someone committing an act associated with organized crime. And to make the distinction that my client is sitting here on trial. At the end of the day,
thanks for watching. Remember to show your support by liking, subscribing, and sharing. It's a blessing. Keep your teacups filled and ready for my next upload. Until then, stay inspired and remember, always stay dipping.